Hi, I'm Dan and welcome to Airbrush Garage. If you're new here, welcome. If you're returning, thanks for coming back. Today's video is going to be about tackling a problem that a lot of you beginners out there have, and I get questioned on all the time. And that is, Dan, when I spray reducer through my airbrush, it's fine. As soon as I put paint in it, it sputters, it's not consistent, or I don't get paint at all. So we're going to tackle that problem today. So if that's something you're interested in, please stick around, consider subscribing, hit that bell so you get future notifications. Couple comments, good or bad, really helps out with the YouTube algorithm. It helps the channel grow. Thumbs up will be great. Don't forget to check out all those Amazon affiliate links down below for the products I use in this video and all my other videos. We've got a real new exciting feature to the channel, and that's that store tab. As you can see right here, you can get merch for the Airbrush Garage, and not only the Airbrush Garage, but there's a lot of cool airbrush things over there. You can get put on mugs, hats, shirts, all kinds of stuff. So go check out that store tab. It really helps out the channel. And with that, let's get started. All right, so I got my Iwata Eclipse here. It's a 3.5 needle nozzle combination. All right, there's a couple things to know that can contribute to the problem of not having paint come out of your brush. First is the needle nozzle size. If you're spraying with something as fine as like a 0.18 or a 0.2, your paint's gonna have to be pretty thin to come out that nozzle. If you're spraying with a 0.5, the paint should come out almost unreduced. But in the next few minutes, we're gonna be talking about the ratios and how to reduce this paint. But in my opinion, there's more that contributes to paint flowing out of your airbrush more than just the mix ratio. And that's muscle memory and finger control, or your finger control gaining the muscle memory that you need. When I first started out, I had the same exact problem as you guys are having, where it was very frustrating. Some days it felt like it was going good. Some days, I'd come back the next day and it wasn't flowing as well. I blamed it on all kinds of things like temperature, humidity, and they do play a factor as well. But after doing it 20-something years, I could almost get the paint to come out most of the times almost unreduced or just a 10% reduction. But not too long ago, or it doesn't seem that long ago, but 10, 15 years ago, I couldn't do that. I'd almost reduce the paint to almost where I would quote, and this, I didn't come up with this, but somebody once said, reduce it until you almost break the paint or break the paint. What that means is there was so much reducer in it, it was basically like an 80% reduction, to 20% paint. That got me by for a little bit, but I don't recommend that. But sometimes you need to reduce your paint down, depending on your nozzle size. You're going to have to reduce your paint down to at least get consistent flow. If not, you're just going to get frustrated and put it down. I promise you, as you do this and you gain that muscle memory control with your finger, you're going to have to reduce the paint even less. It really is a combination of good trigger control and mix ratio. I have a video on tip dry, and that's the other thing that can contribute to non-consistent or inconsistent paint coming out of your brush. I'll be going over the trigger control in just a second, along with the ratio. So I'm going to start out with just reducer in the brush, just like I recommend for all of you guys to do, that you can't get paint flowing out of your brush. And I'm gonna put about, I'm gonna put about 10 drops in there. Now, before I get to doing that, you have to remember, when you're first starting out with something like this, or an airbrush, it can be quite frustrating. But it's like anything else you do that when you're a beginner at. When I first started playing guitar, and this isn't a guitar lesson, but anybody who picks up a guitar for the first time, one of the things you're supposed to learn is a G chord. Well, it sounds like this. Okay? It sounds horrible. You can't play a G chord. And you got to keep playing it and keep playing it until... And after a few weeks of doing it, it sounds good. And that's going to be the same thing with anything you do, same thing with the airbrush. The problem with that is most people can't get past playing the G chord or practicing enough to get it to sound good, and they quit guitar, and that's the same thing they do with an airbrush. I quit 3 times on this airbrush when I first got started because I couldn't get it to spray right. Just like the guitar, I wanted to be a rock star right away. Well, with the airbrush, I wanted to paint beautiful pictures right away. I didn't want to take the time to practice. So, with that said, I have about 10 drops of reducer here in the brush. Okay? The trigger control that you're going to need to learn is, right, when you go down for air, and you're not going to turn the air off, right? Here's where people get tip dry. They pull back, and then they leave go of the trigger before they shut the paint off. And what happens there is, it leaves paint out on to your tip and it dries there. So that's the first thing that's going to contribute to inconsistent paint flow. So when you have that trigger down and you pull back and you want to push forward and you want to leave the air on, because what that's doing then is it's blowing off any remaining paint that's on your needle. So that's the first motion you're going to have to get used to. So now that I just sprayed all of that out of there, let's talk a little bit about ratio. So I'm going to put about, again, I'm going to start with 10 drops of reducer. Now we know that sprays, so you're getting good consistent spray, right? With the reducer. But Dan, when I put paint, it doesn't spray. Well, I'm going to go and I'm going to start with 2 drops of paint. Now I'm using Createx Wicked paints here. I know a lot of you guys out there are using different paints. So just make sure you're using the reducer that's recommended for your paint. In my case, it's the 4011 reducer here. Now, there's 2 types of paints of Createx that I mainly paint with, or I really exclusively paint with, and that's the Wicked colors and the illustration colors. The illustration colors are a lot more forgiving, and I could basically spray these right out of the bottle. I will reduce them about 10%, but honestly, most of the times I really don't need to. Now, I can't say the same for the Wicked. The Wicked usually even gives me a little bit of a hard time. It's just a thicker paint without reducing it. So I'll reduce this anywhere between 10 and 20%. But when I first got started, like I said, I'd reduce this typically 50%. So I was able to spray consistently. But we're going to start off today. We're going to go 10 drops of reducer to 2 drops of the Wicked. I got a little wooden mixing stick here. You want to make sure you mix it up. The other thing I like to do is I like to take my fingers, pinch it over the ends. I know there are some people out there say they wouldn't recommend it. I've been doing it since the beginning. It works for me. And I like to give it a little bit of a backwash because you have the reducer sitting up here in the gun. You drop the paint in. I mix it up, but I can't mix what's down in here. So I want to run it back through and give it a little internal mix. Most paints like Createx will recommend that once you put the reducer and paint together and you mix it, that you let it emulsify or kind of, gel or melt together for a few minutes. Createx actually recommends 10 minutes. It sounds like a long time, but when you're doing other stuff, it's really not that long of a time. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn over here to the board now. We're going to look at some different mix ratios, and I'm going to show you how to get that trigger control and reduce that mix ratio as you go along in your airbrush journey. All right, so here we are at 10 to 2. We got 10 drops of reducer, 2 parts or 2 drops of paint. Okay, again, trigger control is key here. You want to go down with the air, back with the paint, and then off with the paint, and you're still running your air. Okay, now this is a very thin mix, but as you can see, I'm still getting pretty good color. It's literally 2 drops to 10. I don't recommend 1 drop to 10, but I will say you can start with 2. And I'm getting nice consistent paint. 10 parts reducer to 2 parts paint, and that worked really good. What I want you to do is I want you to clean out the brush, or don't really clean it out, but just empty the brush out for the most part. Dump it out, give it a spray, and we're going to start over, and now we're going to go with 10 drops of reducer to 4 parts paint. All right, now that we're cleaned out, yeah, 10 drops to 4 drops of paint. Now, this sounds like a tedious process, but what this is going to help you do, it's going to help you find the right mix ratio for your paint and for the level that you're at. And trust me, as you do this and you go on your airbrush journey and the more of the years and the experience tick by, the less you're going to have to worry about tip dry because your trigger control is going to get better and your mix ratios are going to get reduced as far as how much reducer, because your trigger control is going to help that. All right, now that you're mixed up and you let it sit a little bit, give it a little spray out right there. And now we're at, again, 10 parts of the reducer to 4 parts or 4 drops of the paint. And give that a try. and see if you can get it to spray consistently. And you can hear I stop painting, and every pass as I'm going back and forth as well, my paint is coming off as well. You're rocking that trigger back and forth, right? So you got the air on, you're just rocking that trigger, and you want to stop that paint before you stop your motion. Okay, so here we go again. I'm going to go off camera, I'm going to empty my brush out. We're going to go with 10 parts reducer to 6 parts paint. Well, all right, now we're getting somewhere because now we're over that 50% reduction rate, right? We actually have more than 50% of paint in the cup than we do reducer, because we got 10 parts of the reducer to 6 parts of the paint. I have it mixed up, give it my little internal backwash, make sure everything's mixed. I let it sit for a few minutes, and we're ready to go. Now, at this point, if you start spraying, now I'm going to be able to spray okay, but if you start spraying, you're over that 50%, and you start spraying and you're getting, you know, it's not really coming out, you're getting spotty, it's just not good for you. Make sure your tip is clean or your needle's clean. Try it again. If it's still spitting for you, what I mean by that, you're not getting good consistent flow, I want you to back off, try it again, and go to your 50-50 mix ratio. 50-50 mix ratio, in my opinion, for somebody just starting out, is probably about where you want to be. With at least, this is a 3.5 needle nozzle combination. If you're trying something even smaller than that, then you're probably at least going to be 50-50, if not to 75%, especially when you're first starting out. So this is a really good way to find out where you're going to be. Now, once you say, okay, you know, I'm good, if you're at 6 drops and you're spraying good, and then you try it again and you go to 10 parts reducer and 7 or 8 drops of paint and it starts acting up for you, you now know or can pinpoint where your ideal reduction is, where you can, you know, sit down for an hour and have yourself an airbrush session without getting totally frustrated. Well, all right, there you have it. Hopefully you learned something from this video. I know there's a lot of different methods out there. I'm just trying to share with you what I did to solve my issues and my problems along the way. I get this question or this frustration from a lot of viewers out there. So hopefully anybody watching this video can share with the viewers how they fixed this problem, because almost everybody, as far as I'm concerned, that ever picked up an airbrush has gone through this problem. It's just like that guitar in the G chord or anything else you do, whether it's an airbrush or guitar or anything else. When you're starting at the beginning, it's not going to be easy. You're not going to be a rock star right off the bat. But if you keep practicing, sooner or later, you're going to get all of those strings to sound right, and it's going to sound like a perfect G chord. And that's what you're trying to do with that airbrush. So if you like this type of content, please consider subscribing. You guys know the drill. Hit those links, thumbs up. You guys got it. I really appreciate it. We're growing. And with that, we'll see you in the next video.